When I was about 12, I went and stayed with my aunt and uncle on their old farm. They didn't have kids of their own at this time, and they loved spoiling me. This was my first time spending more than a night away from my parents, so I was super excited. The farmhouse was old but charming. My aunt and uncle went overboard transforming one of the rooms for me, but it was a really nice gesture, so I thanked them profusely and reassured them I would be comfortable. The first evening, we went out to my favorite local restaurant that served the food on a little train. I loved it from the time I was old enough to care about it, and my aunt and uncle always brought me there when they took me for a day or watched me overnight at my house if my parents took an overnight trip. I ordered my usual, which was a cheeseburger, fries, and a milkshake with extra whipped cream. Like I said, they spoiled me, and I soaked up the attention. We rented movies and headed back to the farm. When I say farm, they didn't really have any animals at this point. They had 2 dogs and some chickens. They also had a rather large barn cat named Earl. Since this was my first time staying overnight by myself at their house, I think they wanted to make me as comfortable as possible before bedtime the first night. Because they had rented my favorite movies and bought my favorite snacks and laid them on a super fluffy, soft blanket that said movie night in black stitching. I still have that blanket to this day. We watched the first movie and half of the second before we all started drifting off to sleep. My aunt woke me to have me go to my new room. She made sure I was settled in after brushing my teeth. I was sleeping good despite it being a new sleeping environment. All the food and snacks must have made me sleepy. I was startled awake by a noise directly above me. I tried telling myself it was probably just the house making noises. I knew the house was old like ours, and ours made plenty of weird noises. Almost back to sleep, I heard another noise, in the same area, and this time I heard what I could have sworn was whispering. I sat up and listened intently, but didn't get out of bed. A little unsettled, I drank some of the water my aunt had put on the nightstand and sat up watching some late-night Nickelodeon show, calming my nerves. I kept reminding myself it's a totally new place and I just needed to adjust to the new noises. I heard the whispering again and felt compelled for some reason to go check it out this time. I just had to see for myself that nothing was up there. It was just an empty room after all. I made my way quietly up the stairs and to the door of the room above mine. I paused for a second before opening the door. No one was in there, of course, and it just looked like a normal guest bedroom with a bed and dresser. Shutting the door, I headed back downstairs. The rest of the night, nothing else happened, and I was finally able to fall asleep. The next day, I shook off the previous night's events when my uncle brought out the ATVs. I had my own mini four-wheeler that my parents surprised me with one Christmas to bring to the farm and ride. Every time I visited, my uncle and I rode the trails until we were literally close to heat stroke or too tired to keep pushing the gas. It was a tradition, and that day was no different. Sometimes we would have races, once I was old enough to ride without someone trailing me. We would each take our designated trails and see who could get back to the barn in the center first. Now, of course, I wasn't allowed to go over a certain speed, and I had knee and arm pads as well as a helmet and thick clothing on. But I was a responsible kid, and I knew it was just for fun. I didn't get crazy competitive. This particular day, I was riding what I called my trails, and nothing was out of place at first, until I came up on the old barn. Not the one where we were to meet at, but the original barn that was built decades before that one. I saw a little boy, looking rather hungry and wearing torn-up, dirty clothing. I was just about to holler for my uncle, when the little boy lifted his finger to his lips to shush me. He then motioned for me to follow him. I was reluctant, but maybe he was just afraid of adults and felt more comfortable asking me for help, because I was still a kid, though at least 6 years older than him. I hopped off my ATV and shut off the motor. I ran after the little boy, but never found him. I yelled, "Hey, do you need food or water? I can bring you some," but he never resurfaced. I even tried offering him help from my uncle, and that didn't bring him back either. So I hopped back on my four-wheeler and went to grab my uncle. I knew it wasn't safe to leave a little boy in the woods in that old barn by himself. But we searched for nearly half an hour. Maybe he was in play clothes and wandered over from the neighbor's house. They have a little boy about 6 or 7, my uncle said. Though I knew the difference between just play clothes and old torn up dirty clothes, I accepted my uncle's answer for the time being. But I couldn't deny the little boy's presence any longer that night. I was nearly asleep when again I heard a thud upstairs and whispering. I immediately hopped out of bed and headed upstairs in case the little boy got in somehow. I wanted to make sure he got some water and food if he needed it, and get an adult who could help him. When I opened the door to the bedroom, I froze. There he was. Even though I was expecting him, I was still startled. Again, he motioned for me to be quiet, and this time he had a ball in the other hand. I pointed at the ball. I planned to see if he would play with me and answer some questions while we played. I had little cousins. I knew sometimes you had to gain their trust. The boy put the ball down on the floor and gently rolled it towards me. I swooped down to roll it back to him, but when I did, I looked up and he was gone. I checked under the bed and in the closet. He was gone. There was no way he jumped out the window. We were on the 2nd story, and the window was closed tightly. I was in shock. My friends always talked about ghosts, and I always laughed, but I literally had just seen one. I tried telling my aunt and uncle the next day, but they just said I had such an active imagination and laughed it off. For years after that, I would see the little boy here and there. A few years later, my aunt and uncle had their first child, and I overheard my aunt telling my mom one day that she thought the baby was seeing and hearing things because she would stare off intently and smile at seemingly nothing. Once I hit a certain age, I never saw the little boy again. I think the spirit of the little boy only shows himself to other little kids. My family thinks I'm crazy, but I think my aunt secretly believes me after witnessing my baby cousin staring and smiling at nothing. Wow, another true story, showing children are so susceptible to hearing and seeing spirits. The little boy probably wouldn't show himself to your aunt and uncle because he knew they wouldn't believe. Such a chilling story. I wonder if your cousin saw the little boy up until she was a certain age, too. As always, friends, if you have a paranormal story you would like featured in an upcoming video, email it to the address in the description below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps us make it out there on the big YouTube streets. And with that, I'll see you tomorrow, friends.